So welcome one and all. My name is Esther Hershenhorn, and I am the Regional Advisor Emerita of the very terrific Illinois chapter of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Thank you for stopping by, for clicking in, so we can celebrate our authors with spring and summer books in these virtual book launch parties. Today's celebrant is Chicagoan Amy Alznauer, a debut author of this very beautiful book that I'm holding up. Hope my cell phone picks up. The Boy Who Dreamed of Infinity, gorgeously illustrated by Daniel Miyares, published by Candlewick, and it launched just yesterday. Yay, Amy. Hooray, and mazel tov even. Those who know me know I do not have a poker face, so I am sitting here like a very proud mama. Amy and Ramanujan's story 5 years ago claimed my heart when my chapter established the Laura Crawford Memorial Mentorship to honor a very outstanding writer, teacher, friend, human being, Laura Crawford. My chapter gifted me with the opportunity to serve as mentor of a quote, can't do the quotes with this phone, of a picture book writer ready to cross the publishing threshold. I read Amy's artist statement. We might maybe not need that. I read Amy's artist statement. It was earnest, professional, focused, and then I read her beautiful manuscript, and I knew Amy was the winner. I also knew Amy was the real thing. Fortunately, every review journal out there has affirmed my prescience. Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Booklist, all have starred this beautiful book, noting its elegant writing, its luscious illustrations, its fascinating story. The first time I met Amy was over gluten-free pasta at an Italian restaurant in Chicago's Streeterville. And that's when I learned that just as Ramanujan was destined to uncover illuminating mathematical truths and change the world, Amy was destined to tell his illuminating story to young readers and possibly change their worlds too. I am hugging this terrific book, oh so tight, just the way I would hug Amy if I were at her book launch next week, scheduled next week at Anderson's in Naperville. I am just so proud of her. I'm so proud of this book. And I know that somewhere Laura Crawford is dancing the happy dance. I'll take it away, Amy, however a Zoom camera takes this away, so you can tell us the story behind the story. And no one leave their seat, because we, a surprise visitor whose show and tell will also be illuminating.
Thank you so much, Esther. I think most of you watching know who Esther is, but she is a champion of so many people's careers in this chapter, and she champions people's careers with joy and wisdom. And just to show you a little bit more about who Esther is, on our very first meeting, she brought me this book. It was tied with ribbon, and if you see it a little bit more closely, it says Laura Crawford. So this is one of Laura's books. And she also told me that Laura was working on a project when she died that was a collaboration with Heidi B. Romer. It was actually a book about mathematics, which Esther and I both thought was just beautifully fitting, since the book I was working on was also about mathematics. But Laura was bringing her mathematical expertise, and Heidi was bringing her poetry expertise, and together they wrote a collection of poems exploring two-dimensional shapes. So Heidi actually was gracious enough to share with me a page from this book that isn't yet published, but very well might be someday soon. So I want to read this poem to you. So it is: Chick exists inside his shell. He pecks his oval cell. He picks excitedly, exerting all his energy, until at last the eggshell splits. Exit one, exhausted chick. And one of the things that's beautiful about this book is they're exploring not only mathematical shapes, but they're exploring poetic shapes. And I love that this one was an egg, because what I'm about to say next has to do with a young life moving into what it will someday be. So Esther asked me to talk a little bit about the mentorship and what I took away from that. So, and I looked back at my application for this mentorship. One of the things I had said is that I wanted to learn how to write not only about children, which I was already doing in the adult market through essays and poetry, but to write for children. And for me, that really brought about an imaginative shift. So when you're writing a picture book biography, it's easy to become mesmerized with the adult genius who has all the accolades and achievements behind them. But I think that holds the reader, and especially the child reader, at arm's length. And it also causes your gaze as an author to be informed by that adult. But there's this alternate way to go about it, and that is to imagine the child becoming the person they will someday be. So the arc is moving forward from the child into the adult instead of backwards from the adult into the child. And I wanted to share a particular page from the book with you. So here you see this page. And I just wanted to read this. Ramanujan didn't speak until he was 3 years old. And then he has this moment with his grandfather. His grandfather holds his finger, and together they trace numbers in rice: Anru, Irandu, Moonru. His grandfather counted out loud in Tamil. And then soon Ramanujan began to talk. "What is small?" he asked. He imagined the world with only one man before anyone was there to hear him speak. "And what is big?" He looked up at the big blue space between clouds. And those are actually moments on the historical record. So I'm not creating this. This is really from his childhood. And I think it shows that the questions that would someday haunt his imagination and make him into the mathematician he became were already present in his childhood. So that movement is really what changed things for me. And I think this project was a particularly good one for me to begin with, because I encountered this story as a little girl for the first time. So I just want to give you a tiny bit of that backstory. When I was 5 years old, I was on a trip to Cambridge, England with my mathematician father, and he happened to discover the lost notebook of Ramanujan in a box of papers in one of the Cambridge libraries. And at the time, he was probably the only mathematician who could have recognized this for what it was. So after that, a Ramanujan renaissance ensued that led to implications for space travel, black holes, the computer revolution. And it was such a romantic, amazing, profound event in my life that it really led me in many directions. I went to graduate school and studied number theory, which was Ramanujan's area. I taught that kind of mathematics to students. I traveled to India and England to retrace Ramanujan's steps, and eventually I wrote this book. And hopefully I wrote it in such a way that I was able to convey that magic. And I wanted to just bring this cover up close again, which I think Daniel so beautifully captured there, the magic that I encountered for the first time as a little girl. So now, as Esther said, we have a surprise. Daniel is actually here with us, and I just wanted to tell you why I was so thrilled that Candlewick chose Daniel. He had already written this book, Float. And the story is about a little boy who has a brilliant idea to make a boat out of a piece of newspaper and sail it down those sudden lakes and streams that form in the streets during a heavy rain. And I thought, here's a little boy who is already becoming who he's going to someday be. And I don't know if this is true, I haven't asked Daniel yet, but my guess is that this little boy will someday become Daniel Miyares. And I thought, now here's an illustrator that knows how to get into the mind of a child in that imaginative way that I was hoping for. So here is Daniel to talk about his process himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Miyares, and yeah, I'm the illustrator of The Boy Who Dreamed of Infinity. And Amy, to answer your question, you know, when it rained at my house growing up, or when people washed their cars in their driveways, we would sail things down the edge of the streets into the gutters, and paper boats, leaf boats, anything we could make that would set sail. I think I even sailed a few Matchbox cars with some things attached to them down the streams into the drain. So yeah, there's truth in it. You know, obviously I made the story up, but yeah, that is definitely ingrained in my psyche. Much like a lot of the books that I take on, I try to come from a place of real experience. I find myself going back into my own childhood for all of these things. But to this project, The Boy Who Dreamed of Infinity, we had this conversation about choosing this manuscript and it coming to me and what that experience was like. And I remember very vividly, because me and my reps at Studio Goodwin Sturgis, we had a pretty frank conversation. They often will tell me exactly what they think. They don't pull any punches and say, look, we think this is beautiful and you need to do it, but obviously up to you. But I try to take a manuscript and sleep on it, for far too long, and I apologize if it took me a while to get back to you. I don't know if it did or not, but I imagine I make people nervous because I spend so long with manuscripts, because I really want to roll around them for a while to figure out if it's something that is going to be personal to me. And when I think about a story about a young boy from southern India who revolutionized the world of mathematics with his genius, I didn't think I was the right person for that. Yeah, I would never imagine myself as like, yeah, I'm going to do a book about math and I'm going to do it really well. I love math growing up. I just thought, it was a problem that I could solve, and I did pretty well in my math classes, but I never thought, that's going to be my passion. And so when I first read your manuscript, I said, I got to suspend all my personal biases to really understand this, because I didn't know the culture and I didn't understand the discipline. I really had a lot of room to grow into this story. And so I had to decide, what was the narrative hook for me? And the more I read it and reread it and reread it, it dawned on me, for him, it was about passion and creativity. He didn't see linear sets of information. He saw a playground. And he saw this way to tap into his faith, his spirituality, his relationships with his family and friends. It meant everything. It was all intertwined. And that, to me, it dawned on me that that's the creative process. That's what I trade in every single day, ever since I could hold a pencil. And when you talked about him not speaking until he was 3, my uncle said he didn't know I could talk until I was almost 10 years old. I was always just watching, just taking it in, observing, thinking. And he said, but when I did talk, I spoke in full sentences and had observations about things. And so I relate on many levels to the child in this story, to Ramanujan. And that's how I kind of had to dig into it. And I'll be quite honest, it took me a lot of research, to get into understanding even somewhat his culture and, his family and his values and your world of mathematics. I had to really dig deep. But that's what I love about my job, really, but for me, being able to look and say, okay, what does it look like to play, and do a painting like this, where, yes, it's about numbers and the idea of, how they could almost haunt him in his dreams. He just couldn't get away from thinking about, these ideas and these numbers and how to find new life within them. To me, that's how I feel about drawing and painting. And so I had to kind of realize that. And once I did, then it was just, it was a passion project for me at that point. And that's when I realized, okay, I got to do this. And I know that's a long story, but, for me, I have to find that narrative hook for any project. And with your beautiful story, that was it for me, because really, for my career, I've had the mindset of, can I not do this project? And if the answer is yes, I can live on without doing this project, then I don't do it, because these are big projects, and these are all consuming projects, for me anyway. And so I asked myself that question. And so every project I take on is like, can I live without this project? And the answer was, no, I cannot. I got to do this. So that's where I entered into it. And I'm so thankful I did, because I got to think about numbers in a different way. I mean, you'll notice on the back title page, things like this, like hand painting, things like this, for me, I had to learn what a kolam was and why they were done the way they were done in Indian culture, and to me, I don't normally paint this way, but it was through this story, I'm transformed as well. And I'm so grateful. I think about visual storytelling differently because of it. And I could point to hundreds of examples in the book where that's true, but really, for an artist, I'm always looking for that. There's what I've done last month, but what am I going to do now? And this is just an example of how the story helped me grow into someone new. And it's all because of him and you telling his story. So thank you. And hopefully we'll get to share more inside looks into the book as we go, as this thing rolls out. But it was an honor. And I'm so glad that you got to partner with Esther and bring this to life. And I'm glad Candlewick knocked on my door, because here we are.
That's wonderful.
Yay.
Esther, do you want to say some words to conclude?
Yes, I do. I have, but they're not very visible on my cell phone now that my laptop's not working. I wanted to applaud. We were all applauding through cyberspace for that wonderful sharing of you two. And I had this bouquet, can you see it, of peonies for you and Daniel to thank you. But we don't have the magic to get this through to you. But Amy, I send you infinite thanks for not just the wonder of working with you, which was extraordinary, but also because of the friendship that I won. And people know when I describe this experience, I always say, I was the one who truly won the Laura Crawford Memorial Mentorship. So thank you. And thank you also, Amy has returned so much to our chapter. She is now serving as the managing editor of our newsletter, and that's just so Amy. And I wanted to thank our regional team for making this dream come true. Our regional team, they're really our essential workers at this given moment. And so I'd like to thank the regional advisor, Debbie Topolsky. Well, she's a along with Jenny Wag. And Deb Aronson, the assistant regional advisor, and Cedric Jelani, the Illustrator coordinator, and my fellow regional advisor, Emerita Alice McGinney, for making this happen. I'd like to invite everybody to come to our website and come to the book launch page, where they can find so many links to find out even more about Amy and Daniel and this book. And then also, teachers and librarians, you need to go to our Twitter account, which is hashtag SCBWI in caps, and then _ capital I, capital L, AUNCH, so SCBWI Illinois launch, where our pal and published coordinator, Sarah Aronson, is raffling off a free copy of Amy and Daniel's book, thanks to the Illinois Reading Council. So those are my thanks. I want you to come by next Wednesday at 3:30 Central Standard Time, so we can celebrate debut author Kim Oakland and her YA novel, Move Up. And I'd just like to thank you all for coming by today, and thank Amy and Daniel, and just stay safe, shelter in place, and we'll get through this together.